Hello and welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Rebecca Rutstein. Hey, Rebecca, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. I wanted to start by sharing some works of yours to get people, give them a little idea of the kind of work that you do, although a lot of people do know the work that you do. So I went on your website and selected some pieces that I thought were interesting. So there's no particular order to these. But I was hoping that you could tell me a little bit about this particular piece.
Wow.
You know.
This is a really old piece.
Uh-huh.
Wow. This is back from 2005, and pretty sure it was 2005. It is from a series from Hawaii, or just post a residency I did in Hawaii. So my work over the years has been really inspired by sort of the natural world and geology. And back at this time, I was going on residencies to different locations and sort of learning about those places, but also creating these narratives that were very personal and sort of emotive. And so the titles were always, kind of more personal than would let on if you're thinking about geology in the natural world. But yeah, so this was called I Spent My Whole Life Looking for You. And this is actually right around the time I got married. So I guess that was an appropriate title. um, at least we should hope,
Uh-huh.
still married. So, there's that. So anyway, but yeah, I remember. So, one of the things you can see this sort of maze-like labyrinth on top of, that sort of top layer on the right side, which was inspired by lava tubes, which are actually, underwater caves from volcanoes and from, the volcanic activity in the Hawaiian Islands. So yeah, the whole kind of moving into thinking about geology as inspiration in my work really happened, a few years before this painting, around 2000. I was thinking a lot about I had always loved geology, but it was never something I brought into my paintings. My paintings were just kind of personal diaries. And I think I started thinking about plate tectonics and sort of these forces underneath the surface as causing upheaval above. And that started to resonate with me as sort of a metaphor for interpersonal relationships. And so I think that was really the driving force early on. And just as a side note, this painting actually became an album cover for a band called the Yarrows. So
Nice.
yeah,
Well,
anyway.
the reason I chose this particular one is you have a very specific language of mark making, and this kind of encompasses both the old and the new. In other words, there's a lot in this that you're still working with, like those sort of thick lines that you layer on top of one, but it also has a language that it seems almost dropped. Those little dots, some of those smears, some of those shapes in the back. So I really just wanted to show people that particular piece. And here's another one that's kind of older as well. So you have this wonderful language that has been, when I look at it, I see it as not as an evolution, but as a change. And that's what really, I think, excites me about your entire body of work. I mean, this one is really different with that spinning bed. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So this painting it was also, this was done in 2003. It's called Canopy Adventures. And
Nice title.
thank you. I always had wanted a canopy bed growing up, and I never
Uh,
had one. And so it became sort of a symbol of sort of like a lost innocence, or I don't know, my childhood gone, But so this painting actually is interesting. This was the first time I started using acrylic paints. Prior to this, I had been doing these sort of large scale oil paintings that were very loose and kind of didn't have a lot of structure to them. And this was from part of the first residency I did, where I was really looking at geology. So this was painted in the Canadian Rockies at the Banff Art Center. And I apologize, my heat just kicked on. I hope that's not too loud.
No, I can't hear.
Okay, cool.
You're okay.
So the Banff Art Center, I was there to sort of explore the Canadian Rockies, and this predates the painting that you just saw. And I was traveling for the first time to create paintings, and actually that's not true, but I was traveling, to another country, and was really thinking about the materials I was bringing, and didn't want to use oil paints because just of their drying time and whatnot. So I decided to switch to acrylics. The other main thing that happened in this painting that was really kind of pivotal for me was working with silk screening in my painting. And so this painting encompasses that. There's portions of it that are silk screened. So I was doing these sort of drawings and then using a photographic silk screen process to lay them into my paintings. And so it became this sort of arsenal, with this library of imagery that I could play with in my paintings. I eventually abandoned working with silkscreen and got more sort of satisfaction with just creating all of the lines in my paintings through paint itself. But I used to do a lot of silk screening into my paintings at this time. But anyway, so yeah, I did a whole series of paintings sort of thinking about the Canadian Rockies and the formation of them, and using it as a metaphor once again for kind of interpersonal relationships. And, as a side note with this painting, so I created, I think 12 paintings in Canada, and came back, and this was in 2004, I applied for a Pew Fellowship. And sent them the work I was doing before going to Canada, and then this body of work. And I sent 20 slides, and back when there were slides, and back when you could actually apply for the Pew. But anyway, I got the Pew with this work. So
Nice.
I was really a surprise too, because I'd never gotten a grant, not even like a $500 grant before. So
well, I was attracted to this particular piece for really kind of speaking as a painter. I was fascinated by the secret geometry that's in this, and also those sort of swooping lines. I was thinking of it reminded me of an early work of Victor Passmore, just the way it sort of glides through on top. It was exciting to see that. And then here we are, flash forward years ahead. As a matter of fact, this is the piece that I think it's behind you.
Oh yeah.
Currently. I assume that this is a fan favorite.
I really love this piece. I feel like this piece encompasses a lot of what I'm thinking about these days. So
I can see that. I love the shift, that hard shift that you put in, because oftentimes when layering occurs, they blend so well together, it just looks like one. But that shift into the blue really works, and then that white. It actually leads me to a question I had for you in terms of the natural world. I'm going to guess, but would you say that you're more interested in the macro or the micro in terms of nature?
I'm interested in all of it, but I'm interested in the micro, and I'm interested in sort of illuminating sort of hidden systems in the natural world. So this piece really encompasses that a lot. This piece is called The Matrix. And this piece was part of a show I had at Bridget Mayer Gallery in 2022. And just to back up a little bit, over the last like eight years, I've been beyond just sort of being inspired by the natural world. I started collaborating directly with scientists. And so that's really been, a real transformation in my practice and sort of the way about the world. And so this painting really encapsulates a lot. So of those thoughts and of some of those kind of collaborations I've done. So I started, about 8 years ago, going out on research vessels with marine scientists and exploring the deep sea. And that culminated in 2018, having the opportunity to go down in Alvin, the submersible, deep sea submersible, twice. I'm going to be going back actually in April. Experiencing that place, that kind of otherworldly place, is sort of hard to describe, but oh well, wait, can I go back to the other one? Or I guess we could, well, I mean,
sure.
either. they're both the same. I mean, or they're similar, but I mean, so one of the things that's really fascinating about this kind of system that's happening at the bottom of the ocean is that there are microbial networks, these sort of like literal, they're almost like carpets on the ocean floor that populate at certain areas where there's chemicals coming out of the ocean floor. And so they subsist on these chemicals, and they create like the base of the food web for other organisms. And it's a really amazing, fascinating place down there. Anyway, I don't want to geek out too much, but the thing on the left, like sort of white kind of forms, is sort of inspired by thinking about these kind of open kind of structures that they create. To
My
grow.
first thought when seeing that was I couldn't help but think about the early work of Terry Winters.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if that means anything to you.
I was a big fan. I am a big fan. I looked at Terry Winters a lot when I was in grad school.
How can you not? It's just delicious.
I know, really, really wonderful work. But you know, the idea of drawing and painting has always been really, they've gone sort of hand in hand for me. I don't really separate them. But you know, this in particular is sort of looking at these microbes that they form into these filaments. This is sort of like amplifying something tiny, very, very tiny on the ocean floor and creating big paintings. This painting is actually the other painting.
Right.
Wow.
That's pure coincidence. We did not collaborate.
I know, right? Wow. You know, so this was actually part of like a 22-foot tall installation, really sort of trying to make the invisible visible and the tiny really, really large. But just to go back, just that other painting, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say one more thing about the Matrix, if you don't mind. You know, this beyond like the ocean, I've done other collaborations with scientists, even, you know, at a biotech company, sort of looking at cells within our bodies and how cells connect into kind of like micro worlds within our body, even thinking about, say, the way trees communicate with one another, you know, these fungal networks. And so starting to think about how everything is connected in the natural world, and not only how everything is connected, but how we are connected to it, that we are not separate from, we are part of the system. And so like, for me, this painting sort of encapsulates that. And that's why I call it the Matrix, because I'm thinking a lot about sort of once you start to tune in, you start to see it everywhere. And so that kind of like portal in the painting, that sort of the division, but that sort of, it's not like, it's sort of translucent, but overlapping at the same time. I'm thinking a lot about that sort of idea of these sort of these matrices all around us. You know what I mean? It also kind of relates a little bit to a public art, a mural I have in Philly that where I'm kind of working with those similar lines on one side of the painting. So, but I like the way this was kind of more integrated.
Let's go to this piece. So I was curious, I just came across, speaking of us being connected to the natural world, I just read this research paper talking about, apparently they now can tell that they've done studies of trees, and trees can tell when you stand next to them. Not only are the trees connected through the roots, but they have an awareness now that they're starting to really understand. That's a little geeky moment there, but
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I was curious if you
out, you know.
I too have worked with scientists, and the thing that I found fascinating was that I've always felt that scientists and artists actually have a similar language, especially when they're approaching a problem about almost like a control group and then experimentations within it. So I can see the scientific discovery within your work. Tell me about this particular piece, though. This is because this one's a little bit unusual.
Yeah, you know, I often go back to the hexagon. I mean, it's such a simple and sort of like, you know, the origin of life, you know, it's like this sort of symbol of life. And so I often go back to the hexagon as sort of this like primal form that I you know, work with. And, you know, this piece is, I would say, a little bit more, you know, just a little kind of more broad, just playing with color, thinking about, you know, different modalities of painting, which I often do in my work. I'm sort of thinking about a shift in speed or like, you know, atmospheric versus graphic, or painterly versus something that seems more exact, you know. But the hexagon is something, it's a pattern that repeats itself in nature all the time. And you know, in molecular structures, you look at there's like columnar, like geologic features in you know, Iceland that take on this structure. You know, there's ice crystals found at the bottom of the ocean. They're called methane hydrate crystals, and they have the same form, you know. And so my work is very much about thinking about sort of fractal patterns found in nature and how they repeat themselves at different scales. And so, yeah, this painting was just sort of kind of exploring that, you know.
Yeah, I love the painterly quality for me, the scrubbing out of the underpainting, and then the experimentation with color. It gives it an electricity that I
Thank you.
really.
And I also think a lot about positive and negative space. I think that's something that happens a lot in work, you know.
So speaking of negative space, this was one of the few sculptures that you have on your site. And again, the Terry Winters connection is what really I was like excited to see about this. What is this material? Is this aluminum?
Yeah, no, this is actually it's carbon steel. It's
Carbon steel. Okay.
powder
Laser
coated.
cut then?
Yep, laser cut powder coated carbon steel.
Okay.
And yeah, you know, this was part of, so I have other sculptural work. I actually have a piece right now that's a collaboration at Tiger Strikes Asteroid, which is it just, the show just opened, and it's if people are in Philly, they should come check it out. It's a suspended sculptural piece, but that incorporates AR with and a sound from other artists. So it's kind of interesting. But this piece, I was really excited about. So I've had a lot of shows at Bridget Mayer Gallery. I've been working with Bridget since 2001. And
time flies.
I know, right? It's been a journey. But this was the first time I ever had a show. This was in 2015, where the entire back gallery, I had nothing on the walls, you know, and I had always identified myself as a painter. And this piece doesn't, you know, give it justice in terms of scale. It's very hard to get a sense of scale, but those pieces are individually about 5 by 10 feet. So this is somebody up on a, you know, kind of looking down at the piece. You know, I guess the photographer used, you know.
Well, it's a wonderful piece, and I would love to actually see this in person, because I'm sure the shadowing that this creates is probably just spectacular.
Thank you. You know, so for me, it was like kind of deconstructing a painting. It was sort of taking layers from a painting and bringing them into a space, and actually being able to move in and around those pieces. And so it was exciting for me to sort of, you know, what had happened was I had, you know, created one of these, and then envisioned, they made me think of clouds. And so they actually, you know, inspired the entire show, which also had a lot of paintings in it, but thinking about cloud formations and thinking about, like, when you're flying in an airplane over a blanket of clouds, and sort of imagining that. But they also kind of, you know, they're sort of reminiscent of potentially coral reefs or, you know, mountain ranges. So a lot of kind of play in them, you know.
Well, I really appreciated them, because for me, the kind of sculpture that I'm most interested in is the kind that I can't memorize. So I think your work would make me go back to it, because it's got so much involved in it. As soon as you spin around, I just love that.
Thank
so
you.
I've got a series of questions for you. I want to start at the beginning. Do you have sort of I want to talk about your start in the arts. Do you have an early memory of any sort of art experience that just sort of started you on this journey of yours?
I mean, for me, I think that art was just always such a part of my daily life as a young child. You know, I have like strong memories of being in kindergarten and just, you know, wanting to draw. That was like my go-to activity always. And I think my parents split up when I was 8, and I think it was definitely a way that I kind of processed my emotions. Was through, I remember I used to draw these like portraits of families, like these perfect families, you know, and it was sort of this counterpoint to my imperfect family, you know. But
so take us a little forward. At what
Yeah,
point did you
sorry.
decide to become an artist? That's okay. That's why I'm here. At what point did you decide, all right, I'm going to make art my life?
Well, so it's interesting, when I was applying to college, I wasn't sure that art could be a viable, path. It was what I wanted, but I just didn't necessarily consider it. I didn't come from a family of artists. My older siblings had gone into like more practical fields. And so I assumed that that would be the case for myself, that my parents would, want me to do something that wasn't art.
Mm-hmm,
My
mm-hmm.
dad at the time was going through a major shift in his own work. He left his like practice of 25 years to go manage a minor league baseball team. And he was
Okay.
like, what do you love to do? And I was like, well, I
Mhm.
love art. And he's like, well, that's what you should do. You got to do what you love. And so he really encouraged me early on to pursue it. They weren't going to like finance this, but they were going to
Right.
emotionally
But they'll
support.
encourage you. Yeah.
Yeah, they
Well,
were
that's a
gonna,
big help because I mean, I
no,
know some artists that they receive no encouragement. They still sort of plowed through.
yeah, no, 100%. And I really do credit, and that's why I like to mention that, because it was having their encouragement and their backing. So yeah, I mean, I went to undergrad for art, and got out of undergrad and worked for a few years, and realized very quickly that I wanted to, go back and get a master's degree and really be an artist, not sort of work in an office,
Right, right.
whatnot. So
So speaking of being an artist, I'm curious about your creative process because I love to understand about sort of the background of works of art because it gives a window into your thinking and your understanding. So in particular with creative process, I'm curious to know, do you plan out all of your pictures ahead of time, or how much of it is changing and experimentation during?
It's a great question. I It's interesting. Over the years, I think I've become a little bit more, there's a little bit more organization that happens. I think there's still a lot of play and a lot of improvisation that happens, but it used to be that everything was responsive to the last mark, and there was very little kind of planned. And now, sometimes I really have an idea for a painting, and I layer it, I think about it. I even play sometimes, in Photoshop with different layers to see what it might look like.
Do you keep a
Um,
sketchbook?
it's interesting. I mean, I have a journal that I'm constantly writing in and occasionally sketching in, but I'm not much like, I don't sketch my ideas out. It's
Right.
more kind of up here.
Right. And so nobody would understand your sketchbook but you. It's almost like
Yeah.
a personal language. Yeah.
It's more writing. It's interesting.
Yeah. Would you ever
So
show the sketchbook?
would I ever show the sketchbook?
Yeah,
I
in
mean,
an exhibit.
oh. I mean, probably not. It's
Okay.
not necessarily, I don't see it as like really kind of essential to understanding the work, but I know some people like their sketchbooks are really like, kind of,
Right. It's almost everything.
it's everything, and they're really works of art in and of themselves. I don't necessarily
Right.
view my sketchbooks that way.
Yeah.
I see them more as journals and kind of more sort of kind
Okay.
of through ideas.
Well, if you allow yourself experimentation with an artworks in terms of while it's being created, do you ever get to a point where the painting just sort of fails? Do you ever give up on paintings? Do you ever just stop it and move on to something else? Or are you
Oh,
the kind of artist that I have to keep going until this is done?
I mean, I often have to walk away from paintings, and either come back to them or paint over them, which
Yeah.
I've done many times. I typically will work on more than one painting at once, because
Yeah.
there's sometimes you wrestle with something and you're keeping one part of it kind of precious, and
Right.
the like you have to just like go in and just destroy it to make
Right.
it. But sometimes you don't know what the painting needs until you start working on something else, and then you,
Right.
you sort of can tie something in from there. So,
Uh-huh. So you can destroy it, but maybe this section up here, that's pretty good. So I'll save that, but we'll destroy the rest, kind of a thing.
well, I mean, but no, that's the problem. You can't do that. I mean, that you have to sort of like be willing to just
Yeah.
like keep too precious with it, is what I've found.
Well, I was really fascinated by, that second picture that we talked about, the fact that you use screen printing with your work. So you have experience in that. your work, as soon as I see it, I see all those layers, which is a very printmaker way of thinking about things, right?
Yeah.
So aside from the printmaking within your pictures, which you've since said you've abandoned, have you ever done just printmaking, making like etchings or anything like that? Is that anything you would ever want to do?
You know, it's interesting because I never thought of it that way, that like my paintings really are layered in that way, that they are kind of, it's a printmaking process. But for me, it's much more fun to paint. You know, there's too much process involved in printmaking for me. Like
Well, that's because you need a print master. Just tell
oh,
them what to do, right? So that cuts out
exactly.
all that time. You don't have to worry about it.
You know, when I was in grad school, I did etching and litho, and I've done silk screen. You know, I've done pure silk screening on my own, you know, a bit. I've done some 5-color silk screens, and I've thought about translating some of my, you know, work now into a silk screen, working with like a master printer.
Yeah, I would love to see you, and I don't know if you know Cindy Ettinger.
Yeah,
Go to her studio and just
yeah.
see what could be
I've thought
done.
about that. Maybe I
Yeah.
should put that on my bucket list for this year. Yeah.
So unfortunately, we have time for just 2 more questions. The first one was a question I was not going to let you get by without asking you. I want to talk to you about color.
Okay.
Can you tell me, what do you think about color?
About color?
Hmm?
I mean, color for me has always been incredibly intuitive, and I would say that I feel like color is something that not a lot of things come really naturally to me, but color is something that is just very natural for me. You know, I feel like I think in color, you know, and I can express my ideas with color, you know. So
I I get it. I do the same, but I've also recently come across a lot of artists who really struggle with color, and to me, that's just like
color
a
is the last
foreign thing.
struggle with. Color is
Yeah,
just, it's
right.
everything. Color is
It's
everything.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And so it leads me to my last question. Question I ask all artists. I just love the answer. Simple question: what does making art do for you?
You know, that's an interesting question. What does it do for me? I mean, it's it's not something I really think about. It's just part of me, you know. It's part of my makeup, you know. It's for me, it is the way I process the world, you know. And you were talking about scientists and artists, you know, scientists and artists are actually very similar in a lot of ways. They're thought to be really opposing, but they're not, you know. The people that I've met that are scientists, it's like we're trying to make sense of the world around us, and we're observers, and we're, you know, for me, I'm always looking at patterns, and art is just a way for me to process the world, and it's a way for me to express myself. And I just feel like it's part of my makeup, you know, it's part of who I am. So I
Perfect.
that's
Sums it
it.
up. Sums it all up. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming by and talking to me today. Of course, you know, like a lot of these interviews, now I have 50 more questions for you. So maybe we'll do a part 2 in a couple of years or something. But again, thank you very much for coming by and talking to me today. Appreciate it. And I also want to thank everybody else who tuned in to watch Rebecca and I have a conversation today. Of course, we love it when you like, share, and subscribe, because that helps keep us going. If you have any questions, you can always put them in the comments section. And if I can't answer them, I can pass them along to Rebecca. So thank you very much for watching today. And again, Rebecca, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
It was great. Thank you.
Take care.